it's very difficult for the text to actually show you because, well, I mean, the earliest version we have of the text comes with a commentary by a much later figure, Guoshang. And Guoshang was particularly interested in this idea of footprints, and so following the footprints of others. I'm picking up on this because this idea of imitation is very important to the story I think these three figures tell about identity. I think what all three of them say is that there is no non-imitated identity. That whatever notions we entertain of ourselves, we have to have got them from somewhere. We can't have got them from introspection because if you're trying to construct yourself, it's circular to look to yourself to know what you should construct. So we have no choice but to emulate these exemplars around us. And Confucian ethics is all about imitation of appropriate exemplars. That's being rejected in the Zhuangzi. But again, Zhuangzi doesn't fall into the trap that the sort of romantic Western ideal of authenticity falls into, which is to say, I'm not going to follow the crowd, I'm just going to be like myself, because it realizes that when you do that, you must be following some model. What you think of as your authentic self is just a model that you've copied and then suppressed knowledge of. So, sorry, there's a roundabout way to answering your question. But I think that's the reason why the Zhuangzi can't provide you with an image of what it would be like to escape from this trap, because that image would then just become an exemplar, and as soon as you tried to follow it, you'd be in the trap again. But what I have sort of gleaned from the text, mostly by comparison with these two other figures, is that you can't lift yourself out of this trap of imitation, but you can expand the range of models you're imitating so much that you're effectively no longer imitating anymore. There's a very important thought in kind of Taoist cosmology that a philosopher, Ellen Marie Chen, has written a lot about this. Nothingness and everything become the same in this cosmology. So, nothing at all is the same as just everything at the same time. Sounds weird when I say it like this, but if you imagined being everything at once, that would be the same as being nothing at all. And so you can approach the ideal of not being determined by any exemplars by simply multiplying the number of exemplars that you're following. The more you have, the more kind of open to influences and transformation and interaction you are, the less fixed you are to any one particular model. And so to that extent, maybe you achieve this condition of being wuji, of being, without identity. So, I mean, there's one, just since you asked about stories, or do you want to move on to something else?
No. This is wonderful. No. I'm completely fascinated by it, especially because I don't like have any kind of background in Taoism, whereas I've encountered Spinoza and I've encountered Girard before, so I'm really, really interested.
Oh, okay, great. Well, this line that I quote, where the text says that the genuine person has no self. I mean, that's in a series of three statements. Also has no reputation, also has no name. I might later on say a bit about what those ones mean. But interestingly, this comes in a passage where this figure, Liezi, who's also a very important figure in early Taoism, is described as riding on the wind. So what we have is these different levels of figures who have extricated themselves from dependence on external examples to varying degrees. So first of all, there's a guy who doesn't care about his reputation anymore. He's, sort of untroubled. He gets a certain level. Then somebody else kind of gets to a higher level again. Then we have Liezi riding on the wind. But we're told Liezi still depends on something, which is the wind. Now, what's interesting about this is, and then we're told that the ideal person has no self at all. At the end of the inner chapters of the Zhuangzi, the oldest chapters of the Zhuangzi, Lietze returns again, but now is just a normal guy. He's just sort of tending to his pigs. He lives with his wife. He lives a completely normal life. And I think that there's, that's the closest you get to having an image of what's being demonstrated here, that Lietze becomes the best sort of representation of the ideal when he's so ordinary as not even to look like an exemplar of any kind. When he's being extraordinary and riding on the wind, then that's still not there. That's still not the kind of.
So it seems like, from what I understand, like the scale of along which these figures are moving. I was going to say ideals, but that feels like the wrong word now. The scales along which these figures are progressing is like towards fluidity, like towards, as you say, kind of openness towards transformation. Like if we think of the person who is like totally fixed to a given identity, like I'm gonna say, I'm Joe and I'm a YouTube person, and so like. If I were completely married to that and I like wouldn't know who I would possibly be without that, that would be like me really clinging to one exemplar, even if it's an exemplar of like a kind of fixed image of me. And then like moving outwards, if I had multiple exemplars, I would, have more routes I could go down, I guess. And then like moving outwards, you approach that sort of, if you can take everything as an exemplar or anything as an exemplar, then you're much more open to like fluidity and change and transformation. Have I kind of understood that correctly, or am I kind of missing the mark?
No, I think that's absolutely perfect, and I'm glad you say that. Yeah. In fact, maybe I thought it would be helpful. I'll just read this passage about Lietze.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is the early one. It says, "Now Lietze rode about on the wind with light and easy skill, returning only after 15 days. He never fretted or fussed about pursuing good fortune. Although he had no need to walk, there was still something he depended on. But what about someone who could mount the norms of heaven and earth, ride the fluctuations of the six vapors, and so wander in the limitless? How would they depend on anything? So it's said, the ultimate person has no self." So that imagery of kind of riding on all the different vapors and things, I think that's exactly the point, that you can escape attachment to a fixed identity by taking on a fluid identity. And you take on a fluid identity once you realize that the mechanism is mimesis, imitation. You take on a fluid identity by just always being open to new influences, new targets for mimesis. Yeah.
And how does this differ from, because as you say, when people might encounter some of these ideas, and even the kind of like pop version of Taoism that's kind of filtered through culturally, such that even I, who don't like, I've never read any Taoist literature, the kind of understanding that's filtered through the kind of cultural zeitgeist has been a kind of, I'm reacting to fixed social roles, and really you should kind of be yourself or be authentic. Like that's been the way that it's been expressed to me. And you point out in your book that actually in some ways that gets things entirely backwards. What is it that the person who says, both interpretively in terms of reading Taoist texts, but also kind of philosophically, how is someone going wrong when they say, okay, yeah, I get that the problem is the like fixed identities and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill down, I'm going to find the core of my being, that true authentic self, and I'm going to be that instead. What's the mistake they're making? First from a kind of Taoist perspective, but then like from your own philosophical perspective.
Where they're going wrong is what Girard, who's the most recent figure that I look at in the book, great sort of 20th century philosopher, early 21st century philosopher, calls the romantic lie. And the romantic lie is the idea that the answer of your being has to be answered. No, sorry, the question of your being has to be answered from the inside somehow. Yeah. A completely different tradition. Girard is working in this Christian tradition. There is something of an echo of St. Augustine here when St. Augustine says, I have become an enigma to myself, and the only solution to that enigma is God, something outside of him. But Girard thinks that there's, profound wisdom in this Christian idea, because what it tells you is that the answer cannot come from inside. So I think that what's wrong with this sort of popular Taoism that you describe is that it wants to simultaneously say and deny that there's an authentic self inside of you. I think this happens with Buddhist traditions as well. So, you say, look, there is no self. You have to just let go. You just kind of let things happen. But then what are you supposed to do? Well, you just sort of, follow your natural inclinations or something. And so, well, your natural inclinations are sounding a lot like a self there then. If there's something inside you to follow, then isn't that an identity? Isn't that, isn't that just some kind of essential core that you're drilling down to? It's when it comes to giving the answer that this self, this internal thing always kind of reemerges as this this kind of resurrected, defeated enemy. So I think that the great insight that you have from figures like Girard, I think that it helps to read Zhuangzi, especially with the commentary of Guosheng, in a very different way, which is, no, there is no internal contradiction here. There is no just, terrible paradox that people often run into. The mistake was to think that whatever the answer is has to come from inside the agent. And that, I think, is just the mistake of the gardener. The gardener is out there on his own, sort of being authentic or, resisting identity, resisting imitation, all on his own. I don't think that's possible. I think what you have to do is escape into others. The answer has to come from outside of you, from others around you. And maybe that's why Lietze at the end is just living this normal life where he's, interacting with lots of people and probably influenced in lots of ways. Influenced by his pigs, his wife, and, the town around him.
And presumably, and sort of not, is the idea that he's not like taking any one of those and saying, this is me. He's sort of remaining open to
Exactly.
this, that kind of external influence. Like he's not setting up a division